Hey everyone, Powell here. In this video, I'm going to talk about the sum and difference of two perfect cubes and how to use them to factor polynomials. So, you've seen before in algebra that the difference of two perfect squares, a squared minus b squared, is factored as a plus b times a minus b. And the sum of two perfect squares is just a squared plus b squared. You can't factor that at all. Two perfect cubes, though, can be factored if they're added together and if they're subtracted from one another. And these are two very useful identities to know, especially when you get to factoring polynomials, because you'll have to do a lot of factoring in that case. So here are your sum and difference of two cubes. And there are easy ways to remember these, because largely you may not be given this on an exam, but there is a good way to remember these two formulas. So the first one is if we have a cubed plus b cubed. And notice I put the a and the b in parentheses. There's a reason for that. So if I have two perfect cubes that are added together, a cubed plus b cubed, they factor as the binomial a plus b times the trinomial a squared minus whatever a times b is plus b squared. So when you factor a cubic binomial, you get a binomial and a quadratic trinomial. The difference equation is very similar. You have a cubed minus b cubed to start. And notice that if you have the sum, the binomial factor that you have first is a sum. Well, that's also the case for the difference. So if you have a cubed minus b cubed, your first factor is a minus b. And then your quadratic trinomial as the other factor is a squared plus a times b plus b squared. So two things to note when you memorize these is that if you're adding, make that slightly smaller. If you're adding, your first factor will also be adding, and then the AB will be subtracted. And conversely, if you're subtracting, the first factor will be subtracting, and the AB product will be adding. So there's a sign switch that happens there. You may also notice that you always add b squared. Always. So no matter which you're doing, sum or difference, b squared is always added. So let's try this out on a couple of examples. So for instance, let's start off fairly easy and say x cubed plus 8. Again, notice before I use parentheses. I'm going to rewrite this in terms of what's actually being cubed so I can get an idea of what a and b are. So this is x cubed, because that gets me x cubed, plus 2 cubed. So that means that in the formula, x is a and 2 is b. And that'll allow me to put it into the formula very easily. So I know that a cubed plus b cubed, in this case x cubed plus 2 cubed, is equal to x plus 2, or a plus b, times x squared minus a times b, or 2x, plus b squared, or 2 squared, which is 4. And that's it. The other nice thing about the sum and difference of two perfect cubes is that notice you have a quadratic trinomial at the end. You don't ever have to worry about factoring that. That will never be able to be factored. So you have, those are your two factors. If the directions are to factor completely, you're pretty much done. So it's kind of nice. Let's look at one that's a little bit trickier. 125 r cubed, get rid of x, get away from x and y for the moment, minus 64s cubed. So this is a difference, and this is where writing it as what writing it in terms of A and B is very important. Because if we think about it, what would get us 125r cubed? That would, of course, be 5r. So 5r cubed would get me 125r cubed. There's our A. Minus whatever would get us 64s cubed, which would be 4s cubed. So now, again, I have it in terms of what A and B are. A is 5r, B is 4s. So now I can plug that into, our formula for A cubed minus B cubed. So again, the first factor is 5r minus 4s. And the trinomial after is A squared. Now that's 5r squared. Or I should say that's 5r squared, or 25r squared. Plus A times B, 5r times 4s, or 20rs, plus B squared, or 4s squared, which is 16s squared. And again, that trinomial cannot be factored, and that is your factorization. So it's pretty straightforward. If you put it in terms of A and B, it makes it a lot easier to keep track of what A and B are. And then you can just plug it in, do a little calculations here and there when needed, and it's pretty cut and dry. If you like this video, please subscribe below and comment on any topics you'd like me to cover. And I'll be doing more factorization videos because there's usually algebra books have a chapter where factoring is key. So if you can get a handle on it, you'll be golden. Thanks for watching.